Lesson number 2 is over rational and irrational numbers. Repeating decimals can be written as a decimal with the bar over the number that is being repeated for infinite amount of times. So for the first example, you have 0.6666 and the dots mean it continues on to be a 6. I can rewrite that as 0.6 with the bar over top. And again, that just shows that it goes on and on for infinity amount of times. In your calculator, when you have a repeating decimal, it usually will say 0.66666 and the last number will be a 7 because the calculator can't go on forever. It just rounds it up to 7. So in your calculator, if it's the same number every single time but the last number is one above that, you just know it's a repeating decimal. Again, for 0.32 repeating, you can just write it as 0.3 with a bar on top of the 2 to show that the 2 is what is repeating, not the 3, just the 2. If you think back to when we were doing decimals, fractions, and percents, we had talked about when you go from a decimal to a percentage, you move the decimal 2 spots to the right, and why that was. Well, it was because we are multiplying by 100, and the hundredths is 2 spots to the right. So think about what would happen if you multiplied a decimal by 10, by 100, and by 1,000 if it's a repeating decimal. And again, I know it's a repeating decimal because you have the fraction bar on top to show that it is repeating. Go ahead in your notebook right now and write down what you think the answer would be for the 3 problems written down. Here are the answers you should have gotten from the previous problems. If you notice in the first one, I have 5 and 65 hundredths repeating. On the first page, it was 5, 6, and the bar was over that. And now the bar is over the 6, 5. But again, it doesn't matter because it's going to be repeating between those two numbers. The second one, you have 32 and 32 hundredths repeating. And then the third one you should have gotten 646 and 46 hundredths repeating. You do not lose the bar on top of the repeating numbers. That stays there. Last year you started learning about how to solve for x. Well, using what we know from last year in your math class as well as what we learned in the previous slides, 10x equals 12, and I'm trying to figure out what x is equal to. 2 things I can do. I can divide both sides by 10, or I know that if I multiply something by 10, I'm really moving the decimal 1 spot to the right. So right now, there's my decimal, but I'm going to do the opposite because I'm going backwards. So x is really equal to 1 and 2/10. Same thing would be for the next one. I could either divide both sides by 100 to get x by itself, or I know my decimals after my 6, and again, if I'm dividing by 100, I have to move it 2 spots to the left. So when I move it 2 spots, x is really equal to 16 hundredths. This is going to be very important for you to understand and remember for the lesson you will be doing next. Make sure you have these notes out tomorrow when you come to class because this will be very helpful for the lesson.